Welcome to We Can Be,
the podcast of the Heinz Endowments,
where we work to build
an exemplary,
sustainable region
where everyone prospers and belongs.
Welcome to We Can Be. I'm your host, Chris DeCardy. From ancient Greek philosophy to our country's own Native American history, cultures around the world have embraced some variation of the phrase, water is life. Millions will see the life our region has built along our rivers when the NFL Draft comes to the Pittsburgh region in April of 2026. Much of the beauty, public green space, and vibrant activity along our city's Monongahela, Allegheny and Ohio rivers can be traced back to the organization whose leader I am lucky to speak with today. Our guest is Matt Galluzzo, the president and CEO of Riverlife, which serves as the guiding force for the redevelopment of Pittsburgh's riverfronts with high-quality design, accessibility, and environmental integrity. Prior to joining Riverlife, Matt led the creation and implementation of the first community land trust in western Pennsylvania and oversaw $200 million in public and private investment for Pittsburgh's thriving Lawrenceville neighborhood. Riverlife came into the world in 1999 with key support from Heinz family members who recognized the enormous potential of visually and environmentally sound riverfronts. We'll talk about that legacy and the high bar Riverlife has set as a national leader in the riverfront preservation and sustainable development communities. Rivers, and I think you can't talk about Pittsburgh's topography without them. It is one of the most amazing features of this region. For folks who don't know it well, describe it. What role do rivers play in Pittsburgh and the surrounding area?
I say without our rivers, it's just a big field in the middle of southwestern Pennsylvania. These are the defining characteristics of the region. It's deep within our DNA as a region to appreciate the rivers. And over the last 30 years, I think that appreciation has been deepened because of a lot of folks really committing their time and energies to ensure that there is a true public access. They are the defining characteristics of this place.
They have been for generations, but very differently and appreciated differently. How were they utilized, especially at the height of the industrial era? And what has that left as both a legacy that's difficult or opportunities that you see important for this period?
Well, I think it's good to remember that this really started as a trading post, right? This was a place, this was a beachhead from which we'll call them explorers moved west. And so, it had a real importance in the American identity. And even before that, as a sacred space for Native American populations. Obviously, we know the Industrial Revolution was really seeded here and, served as the backbone for the creation of an industrialized nation. I think the advent of Point State Park 50 years ago and the dedication of the fountain really set in motion an appreciation for these rivers being used in a different way. We saw the decline of the heavy industry. It's fortuitous that organizations like Riverlife and Friends of the Riverfront and our strong philanthropic partners understood that there could be a different future that really honors the industrial heritage of this region, understands that there is still a working component to our rivers, but that rivers are for everyone. And that means places for respite, for recreation, for imagining our relationship with ecology in a different way. And hopefully we're playing a part as partners in signaling those other uses.
What about that for you? Why important to you personally? How do you care about, interact with rivers in your life?
So my first field placement in graduate school, so I was new to Pittsburgh, was in Hazelwood. And that was a neighborhood that, as folks know, had experienced a real disconnect from the riverfronts. In fact, we're still talking about it today. How do you connect Hazelwood Avenue back to the riverfronts? That, for me, is deeply held, even 25 years later, that desire to connect to this thing. And so there's been a thread throughout my career, whether I was in Hazelwood or the North Side or in Lawrenceville, another riverfront community, that these spaces are really important and that we're never going to be done in creating a world-class experience on our riverfronts.
So you talked about Lawrenceville, and you led the Lawrenceville Corporation, and in a period where that community has gone through extraordinary change. Talk a little bit about that experience with the rivers, what it's meant for the people and community. And you have mentioned your mission now is that the rivers are for everyone, and how important to be able to address that hasn't been the case in the past. How did that show up in Lawrenceville, and what lessons have you brought to Riverlife?
Lawrenceville, while I was there, was a very proud community that had a deep appreciation of its own history, its own industrial heritage, and a 21st century lens on what that meant, right? And creating additional access along our riverfronts, creating better connections for cyclists, for transit users was part of our work. And so the community was changing really dramatically from 2007 to present, really. But during my tenure there, it saw a pretty drastic change in composition, in land use, in affordability, and the composition of the business district. And so to say that there was a strong appreciation for how they might get better access to their riverfronts, that can't be overstated. They wanted to see that. And, there was a time, just to give you some context, where Riverlife was ebbing as an organization. There was, I think, a mounting belief that the riverfronts were good enough, or that they were done, and that we should focus on other things. I was sitting in Lawrenceville at the time and saying, oh, no, we've got plenty of work to do. The organization that serves as the sort of steady hand at the helm, as the steward, needs to get more savvy. We need to get more sophisticated, and we need to double down on this vision. And it was about the same time that we were having conversations about, hey, who might lead this organization into its next chapter? And so that's really what brought me here, was this idea that we're not done, and this is a vehicle for what I'll call transformative development. This is really the lone engine to be able to drive that.
Bring this to life. What's one of the pieces of the work you're doing right now that you think is illustrative and emblematic, and really draw that out? What is it? What are you creating? What are you doing? What does it look like?
At one point, Pittsburgh was the shining example of riverfront development. We were doing it better than anyone, and people were coming here to learn what we had done. And most of that was related to the capital projects we had undertaken. What we, I think, flagged on as a region was how you create a complete experience. How are the riverfronts, replete with amenities and attractions that you can't find anywhere else? Any resident of Allegheny County, any visitor to this region should be able, in our vision, to come down to the riverfronts and wander into something that they can't find anywhere else, and that the services are there, public restrooms, maintenance crews that can meet their expectations, right? Just basic, let's make sure that people are having a high quality experience here, that they're having those places where they can make memories. That's the whole idea. And so there are a couple geographic areas where we're working on that work. The first, of course, is the West End Bridge. The West End Bridge is an epicenter for significant infrastructure investment, both PennDOT restoring the West End Bridge, which is going to be 100 years old in the next 4 years, and Alcosan, which is doing their clean water plan and staging much of that work right at the foot of the West End Bridge. So our job is to move in lockstep with those efforts to ensure that the benefits of those infrastructure investments and those real estate investments accrue to the public.
If you are successful to the standard you want to set, what does that look like?
Well, this is an area right now that does not have park space on either side of the river. It has no accessible connections to the river for cyclists, for strollers, for individuals in wheelchairs. The bridge itself is the most dangerous intersection in at least this half of the state, possibly the entire state. And so our job is to provide value to those other partners, bring resources, bring planning acumen, bring the lens of this being a priority to policymakers, and to bring financial support. And so we've invested over $2 million in planning for ramp structures and ground plane improvements to the bridge. PennDOT cannot do that, and so we are a valued partner of theirs. Alcosan isn't going to do that. They'll partner with us, and so us bringing resources to do that work and provide interface with community is a huge value to them. And so, but if we wave the magic wand and look back in 10 years, the idea is that we will have ramps and parks on either side of this bridge that connects to people. The other place where we are focused is really the Sister Bridges. And, the Sister Bridges are iconic. We've looked at this area and said, okay, downtown is in a state of transition. It's been fragile for some time. What role can we play to make this a place where it's the town square for this region? How do you use the parks on either sides of the bridges themselves, and the water as the binder between PNC Park and the Warhol on one side of the bridge with the cultural district on the other? It's really making this a place where you can ride your bike in, park your car, and find interesting things to do.
At my direction, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania will invest $62.6 million in downtown. This initial investment will spur nearly $600 million in investment.
Shapiro says it will bring new housing, new public spaces, like a riverfront park here in the cultural district, and a facelift for Market Square.
There are many, many interests that have a part on or along the river. But there has to be an interest that is of, for, and by the river and the people in order to make sure that that's coherent and it comes together, that description of the West End Bridge. There's a huge effort that leaders and residents across this community have pulled off in the Golden Triangle, in this core downtown, the confluence of the rivers, where so many people gather and congregate, sports and economy. We're really pleased with Arts Landing and the announcement there, which is, a full square block in a really ripe location to be able to have people come together. So talk a little bit about the potential over time to connect that Arts Landing to the real landing of the river and that potential that you see down the road.
Yeah, I think this needs to be underscored. To have all of the parties, all of the relevant parties singing from the same sheet music at the same time is really important. And we don't see that all the time. But we are in a moment where you've got everyone really rowing together, which feels like an important moment.
Nice river analogy. That was
you
good.
Like that? Yeah. The Sister Bridges experience that we talk about was a really important moment. We are thrilled that our original vision for the Sister Bridges experience has expanded. We're in the process of restoring a beautiful park at Allegheny Riverfront. And of course, that's phase one. The next phase, and I think the biggest move we will be making, is really what happens between the convention center and the entrance to Point State Park, the Fort Duquesne Boulevard, the 10th Street bypass. What happens there, I think, is going to be an exciting thing for us to work on over the next decade, because the civic reality has changed, right? Even in the last 5 years, but if you look 15, 30 years ago, the way that these spaces were being used, the Strip District, for example, the 10th Street bypass was used as a highway to get distribution out of the Strip District. That's no longer needed. It's really a transformed neighborhood. Fort Duquesne Boulevard and a 10th Street bypass existing as they are in perpetuity seems like a really bad land use. And so we are really right now engaged in a planning effort to determine what the future of those pathways look like. Can we create a graceful transition from downtown down to the riverfronts where you're not playing Frogger through traffic to get down there? And so it's a unique opportunity.
Yeah, I imagine a future where the lawn space to watch the fireworks on 4th of July from right there would just be extraordinary, or other events, the NFL draft that is coming, and to have those spaces to be able to make those connections that you're talking about is so compelling. And this transformation that you're talking about what is a downtown and what is it for and what will it be for in the future, and that opportunity set is one that is really exciting.
Pittsburgh has leveled up its river game once again.
It's a sure thing. Riverlife has really upped their game and have created this awesome floating park. And I'm with Matt Galluzzo, CEO of Riverlife.
We really were committed to getting people out on the water. It really does change your perspective, whether you're talking about the ecology or the vistas behind us.
Matt, you guys are always trying to find ways to create an experience on the river, and you guys, you've really outdone yourselves this time.
So talk about the barge and how exciting that is for you as being the on the water part of this experience. What is it and how are you going to use it?
So what is it? Sure Thing is a 4,800 square foot platform for programming. 10 sectional barges. These are 40 feet long. They are 10 feet wide. They are basically big Legos that we are able to pin together. So it's right between the Roberto Clemente and Andy Warhol bridges on the North Shore. So it's looking at downtown. It is temporarily moored in sight with what are called spuds. We've learned a lot about barges.
I can tell.
The idea is that this is both modular, so those 10 Legos, we can move those around. We can augment with additional sections if we want to increase the capacity, and it's portable. So the potential applications for a Hazelwood, a North Shore, a Lawrenceville, a Strip District, it is an experiment. It is a template, we hope, but it's really an invitation for the public to come down to the riverfronts and experience them in a different way. We opened officially on the 1st of July, and the feedback has just been absolutely incredible. In the first weekend, we had 6,000 people on board.
Awesome. So there are hundreds of thousands of people that live in this region, and very few of them ever have the opportunity to look at the landscape from being on the water. I'm curious what those 6,000 people experienced, and what have you heard from that experience in these opening days?
People are dazzled by the quality of the work that we've done. I'll do a little sidebar. Our work is really about co-creation. Whatever we create is really a byproduct of the relationships that we have around the table as we're doing that work. And it only takes one visit to this intervention for folks to go, oh, someone cared very deeply about how this was produced. Everything from the brand that we've produced, the color schemes we've produced, the railings around the perimeter and the scaffolding that we've created for our sunshade structure, the artists that we've employed to do, whether it's a mural on the surface or this beautiful chandelier that's made of capiz shells that sits in our shade structure that Fran Flaherty did. Everyone has an appreciation that people care deeply about how this thing was developed. It's a gift to Pittsburgh, and people really, I think, appreciate that. It's also signaled for us that we actually have a dearth of these types of experiences. So we have, I think, a half dozen what I call their nets. There's a net lounge that sits over the water, cantilevered over the water, and so you can really relax.
I've seen pictures. It looks really cool.
It's amazing, but the demand for that has been overwhelming. That tells us that we're onto something, but B, we're under-resourced with those types of moments, right? Where you can come down with your family, it's free, you just go experience something, and you make memories. That is only possible really in a few places. And for me, that is fuel in our tank for future work that we want to do, but a reminder that, boy, we've got a long way to go.
So you've talked several times about the importance of collaboration and the importance of building with partners. That was the beginning of Riverlife. Riverlife was a vision that came together with business leaders, community leaders, advocates for the natural beauty and the environmental importance of the rivers, support of philanthropy. Teresa Heinz from the Heinz Endowments was a huge proponent, believed deeply in supporting it to begin. What is the importance of those collaborations? Who are you working to bring together, and when do they go the best to be able to tackle really gnarly community problems?
How much time do we have? I mean, I think we are a 15-person staff and we are a 17-person board. In order to realize our vision of Pittsburgh, where world-class riverfronts are essential to the region and belong to everyone, there's no way that those 32 people would be able to realize that. And so it is deeply held within our values to collaborate. And I'll just say that I think transactional relationships don't work in this line of work.
And what does that mean? What do you mean by that?
We have longitudinal work that we do. And if we treat issues or people as transactions,
one time only for this, just get it done.
Just get it done.
Right.
We need a deeper connection. We need a deeper connection to our partners, to the communities we serve, and that has to be very intentional. And we need to be very transparent about what that looks like. And so what does that look like? And who are those partners? Our most important partner is the city of Pittsburgh. They have control of the most amount of real estate on the riverfronts. On the nonprofit side, obviously, Friends of the Riverfront is our closest partner. And, we have worked vigorously with Friends of the Riverfront and Venture Outdoors, Land Force, and Allegheny Cleanways to codify our relationships, and I'll just give an example. We have a memorandum of understanding with Friends of the Riverfront because we share space. There's some overlap. Let's make sure that we're delineating roles as much as we can and identifying how we address sandpaper between organizations, right? That's going to happen. And so the value that we have together working on these really thorny regional issues benefits from us having a tight relationship. Philanthropy is a huge part of our work, and trust-based philanthropy, believing in the importance of this work, understanding that, we're going to be relentless and maybe insufferable in our pursuit of this, and to know that we've got folks in our corner is super important. The other sort of collaboration is with community.
Yeah, talk about that.
We talk about being an invited partner. We're a regional organization, and we have a different weight when we come to community conversations. And so we want to make sure that we're approaching those relationships competently. And so we have now a community engagement coordinator on staff. We have a set of community engagement protocols on our website to really inspire a deep commitment to places where we want to create transformative change. So the West End communities are a perfect example of how we've employed those protocols. Each community has their own orientation and their own capacity. And so we try to meet those communities where they are. And some communities we take on a much more, what I'll say, community development orientation, where we're, serving as the convener. We are doing traditional, big tent community meetings, but also non-traditional. So in the West End, for example, we've supported organizations over there financially to collaborate with us. Mm-hmm. They are coming on kayak trips and boat trips, all of the things that reflect our commitment to co-creating the changed reality, right? But some of it's lighter touch. So, what we do in the Manchester community right across the river is different. There's a community that has capacity in community development. And so we really rely on our partners there to tell us how they want us to engage.
There is still work to be done to clean up the rivers so that everybody can enjoy them, so you could actually swim in them, so you could actually fish on their banks and be really confident that what you pulled out of there you might want to serve your family. And at the same time, the rivers are changing. We've got climate change and the impacts on the rivers. We've got different weather patterns, rainfall. So even a river system that has dams to be able to control some flooding that historically was such an important issue, those dynamics are changing. So talk a little bit about the rivers themselves in this moment.
I think we are really struggling right now with this issue. And there are great partners who are the Water Collaboratory, the Three Rivers Waterkeeper. We have said we are not going to lead on those efforts because there are other organizations doing that leadership work. And so our team, Gavin White, our Director of Planning and Projects, is at a lot of tables to make sure that we are providing value to those. But I will say part of the goal of the barge is to get people out in those spaces, to be able to talk about the river ecology and the importance of these systems, and that, it's really, this region has a very limited understanding of how these rivers work, their cleanliness or lack of cleanliness, and whatever we can do to provide our voice to that is, I think, important. I'll also say that other regions have figured this out. Communities up and down the Ohio River that have, I think, made a stronger claim from the universities to do actual high-quality field research. In Cincinnati, Thomas More University has a field station in an old lock and dam. They do tons of great work. There are organizations like Orsanko that have really taken on the issue of mussels and paddlefish and these really important issues that I don't think Pittsburgh has it in their conscience right now. We just don't have that view. And so
why not?
I actually don't know. As an organization, we may own some of that. Maybe we haven't led in the same way as some of these other places, but it hasn't been an area where we have excelled, I think, comparatively to other cities.
I'm curious. I think about this in a clean air context because I've heard this before, and I think it's hard to hold two things at the same time. Thing number one is for our water and our air in this region relative to 70 years ago, the improvement is extraordinary. Extraordinary. And at the same time, not good enough, especially seeing what is possible and what folks can experience in other urban areas in our country or in other places in the world. It's hard sometimes to have both of those things. It's what I liked about your statement early on, is sort of that impatience to say, yeah, we're getting there, but we're not there and we need to keep going. Yeah. Does that resonate? Does that make sense to you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I also think there's an out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah.
And so introducing a barge where you can see things floating down the river, and you can hear from us about how we've partnered with Allegheny Cleanways, right, to deal with on the water trash coming down the rivers. Yeah. And they've got their other programs and they're doing amazing things. But for us, it's an education opportunity that we still have a ton of work to do, and we're going to keep this present as an issue. As it relates to climate change, there's a ton of work that we need to do to better understand what the next 50 years of our riverfronts are going to look like.
Our team coverage continues at Point State Park, where river levels are still rising.
Rain is still coming down out here, and because of the flooding concerns around downtown, the bathtub section of 376 westbound is closed. The river is expected to rise enough to come over the river.
It only takes one significant flood to be reminded, oh, these are breathing waters, and there's not a lot of place for this excess to go, and it will really impact the quality of our experience in an urban environment. We don't have, I think, a really good vision for how we accommodate that, what we think will be a drastic change over the next 50 years. So
yeah, I think that resonates. I think the number of days the 10th Street bypass has been underwater and is only going to be more so. The answer is not going to be essentially building a bigger wall or a taller wall. It's going to have to be something more porous. And so what does that mean for our interaction with our riverfronts, especially in really urban areas?
And we've seen this applied in other places where they've created graceful experiences that allow these floodways to give them the space to breathe. And when they're not breathing, out, they're really great spaces to be in, but they need to be resilient and they need to be well designed, and we need to be intentional about that.
So Riverlife, 25 years? Is that where we are right now?
Coming up on 26, yeah.
So quarter century. As you think about that history, you think about the role that you've had now, go forward here a bit. What does success look like in the next 25 years? What do you want for Riverlife and what do you want for this region?
The beauty of our work is that Pittsburghers, residents of Allegheny County, visitors to our region, they get to enjoy this stuff. They can go to Point State Park Fountain and see those improvements and take those pictures and have those memories forever. And that is amazing. The real beauty for me is that people we never meet, generations from now, are going to benefit from our work. It is with this longitudinal view that we have developed our plans as an organization to ensure that, so that I can basically guarantee that folks in 30, 40 years are going to have a high-quality experience on our riverfronts. That feels really important. It is the first position that I've held where I've said somebody else is going to be able to benefit because we've planted those seeds now in such an intentional way. So my daughter's now 16, and when she was just learning to ride her bike, we were down on the North Shore. We rode across the Fort Duquesne Bridge. My favorite part on the riverfront is leaving the Fort Duquesne Bridge and entering into Point State Park, because you leave the din of the traffic on the Fort Duquesne Bridge and you come right into Point State Park and you start hearing nature. It's Disney-esque in that regard, right, where you move from one land to the other. So, we've been riding around and we end up at Point State Park Fountain, and my daughter does, a half dozen cartwheels on the fountain, right? And she's exhausted, and she turns to me and says, "Okay, what's next?" And I had a sincere panic of, I don't know where ice cream is from here. I had a vague idea of where the closest bathroom was, right?
Right.
It was really that moment that when I started interviewing for this position, that manifested. And I was committed to this idea that we needed to fill these riverfronts with amenities and attractions that you can't find anywhere else. And that, as she brings her family down, she's going to be able to benefit from those too. And so, if I sound self-actualized, I probably am, because we're doing a lot of fun things.
So the name of our podcast is We Can Be, and we like to end each episode. What do you think we, as a community, country, world, people, what can we be?
I think we can be careful. I think we can be kind. I think we can collaborate despite our differences. I think we can think big. Yeah, I think we can think big.
Let me turn to Jasmine DeForest, who runs our work in this area at the Heinz Endowments. Jasmine, you have a long history of thinking about place as important for bringing community together, place as important for fostering creativity and exploration. And Matt talked about the barge that they put on the river earlier this year. And you could tell how excited he was about that as a place-making and place-gathering opportunity. So talk about that example and then build that out from your experience working as a philanthropist and supporting organizations to do that, what that looks like and how we could do more of it.
At the core, I believe that public spaces are where people of all ages, ethnicities, socioeconomic levels should be able to come together. They come together with their friends, their family, their loved ones, and their communities. And typically you see people coming together in their backyards, and then that extends to public parks and riverfronts where you can have picnics and programming and all sorts of things. And so by them doing this, the sure thing, it gives us an exciting activation that has food and beverage. And so just having something that is a great attraction on the riverfront, I think is just going to be a great opportunity for Pittsburgh.
So you've talked about bringing people together in all these sorts of informal ways in order to build community. You lead our program in arts and culture. And I guess I'm interested in what is the role of public art in these public spaces that you see as being important in creating that dynamic environment?
I'm of two frame of minds. The infrastructure, I believe that everyone should have access to safe, inclusive, clean public spaces just across the board. But when you add these elements that bring joy and moments of awe, that happens naturally through nature itself. But when you can integrate an interactive or a unique, well-designed public art activation, it brings people together in a different way. It creates Instagrammable moments. It creates wayfinding. Hey, go to this X exhibit, and it's also a way to kind of represent multiple cultures. So if you have diverse artists who are included in these opportunities to bring their cultures, their lived experiences into these spaces through art, especially if there's an interactive component to it, that's even better.
To build on that and to build out, because one of the things we have the privilege as a grant maker is to work with multiple organizations and to work with them over an extended period of time. And Matt used this fun story of his daughter to illustrate that these public projects along the river can't be transactional. He called it longitudinal. His daughter was like, hey, what's next? I got down here and now I want to do the next thing. So from your perspective, why is it important to knit together or weave together a series of these public space investments over time?
The rivers here are like the connective tissue. And so typically municipalities, city government, don't usually have the resources or the capacity to maintain public spaces, to care for public spaces, to bring public art and programming into public spaces. And that's where I believe philanthropy comes into play and plays a vital role, because we're able to think beyond elections. We're able to think beyond limited resources, budget constraints of a city administration, government bureaucracy, and think about capital investments, think about design, think about art, think about programming approaches that can bridge the gap that some of these organizations like Riverlife might have. We want these spaces to be activated and beautiful for generations to come. And even when you think about the ecology, it's not just us, it's all that's happening underneath it in the environment too that need that support as well. And so we're able to think about long term.
That raises another point that I think Matt brought up beautifully, which is that durability that you're talking about being linked to deep engagement with the people and the businesses who are right there and nearby. Why is that important? And specifically for sort of big and ambitious public space or public art projects?
Yeah. It's important because the local residents and the businesses, that's where they are every day interacting with these spaces. And so I really love how Matt and others are deeply engaged with the communities that are surrounding the riverfronts and ensuring that they're getting feedback, that they're getting input from the community, because you need amenities. So when you think about a riverfront, like a neighborhood, like a 15-minute neighborhood concept, right? You want to have those amenities. You want to be able to say, okay, we're here. This is great. The grass is beautiful. The river is beautiful. But what if you want an ice cream? What if you want affordable food and beverage? That is essentially the amenities that you would get within a neighborhood, and then that spills out into the economy, the businesses. The riverfront is an attraction mechanism, not only for the residents first, but also for people who may want to visit and be a tourist here in Pittsburgh. We want people to come here and say, that was cool, I can picture myself living here.
Yeah. You know, that feels particularly important this moment for our downtown in Pittsburgh. Our strengths in revitalizing downtown are the rivers and culture. And so these efforts that you've got from Riverlife, from the Downtown Partnership, from the Cultural Trust, to create community and be responsive to community actually are going to be the durable mechanism to attract more people to come downtown, to live downtown, and to see themselves downtown. You've come from Detroit, where you've had a long philanthropic career, and Detroit has gone through that progression itself. Is there any lesson from Detroit that you see as being applicable for our downtown that you'd want to draw out?
I would say to not be afraid of taking risk and thinking innovatively. And I think that we have that spirit in Riverlife, in the Friends of the Riverfront, in the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. And I also really would say just keeping people at the center of that. How are they engaging with the space? Is it safe? Is it accessible to all, from mobility, ADA accessibility, learning, all of those different things, and just thinking about every single level from a human-centered focus is really important. It has to be activated in a way that feels like it's for all and clean and safe.
Yeah, it's so important. And ultimately, we are not a region right now that is growing in population. We've got to help everybody here completely see themselves in community, which is a big part of what you do with our work in arts and culture, and then to be able to branch out and see as an attraction to get more folks to come. We've got the leaders and we've got the ideas here, and I know you see Riverlife as a long-term and durable partner in that, and it was just a delight to hear Matt explain his excitement for that today, and fun to be able to hear you bring your perspective into why it's important and what we're looking to help support in the future here. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. This is great.
And thank all of you for listening and for what you do to make a difference in the world. I hope you join us next time.